Okay, well, good morning and thank you for coming today. My name is Nick and I'm an ADM at the Ministry of Finance. I'm joined by my ADM colleagues, Sydney from the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, Kelsey from the Ministry of Intergovernmental Affairs, and Dong from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Our team has been tasked with examining solutions to address the growing number of rough sleepers and encampments in Ontario. And today we've put together an overview of this problem and a number of realistic solutions the province can implement to address the immediate and long-term needs of rough sleepers and the surrounding communities. So next slide, please.
Rough sleeping is not a new phenomenon and has affected many countries around the world, but it has reached emergency levels here in Canada in recent years. In major centers like Toronto and Ottawa, we have seen tent cities ranging in size from 10 to 300 plus individuals pop up throughout 2021. COVID-19 has played a major role in the growth of encampments, and many people experiencing homelessness have seen the outdoors as being safer and have chosen to live outside instead of at crowded, outbreak-ridden shelters. Encampments in Ontario have been met with opposition from the public and municipalities, and many communities have raised legitimate safety concerns as rough sleepers can suffer from health problems related to exposure and disease caused by lack of proper sanitation. There has also been an increase in fires at encampment sites causing concern. Others are concerned about the presence of encampments in public spaces like parks and community gardens. Municipalities are under pressure to remove encampments because of neighborhood concerns about criminal activity, garbage, cleanliness, and noise. This pressure to remove camps has led to police interventions, which often turn violent. In many cases, the police are the only avenue Ontario municipalities have to remove encampments, even though sending the police has harmed rough sleepers, angered homeless advocates, and inspired protests. Next slide, please. Part of the emergency situation we're facing is that rough sleepers are different from other individuals experiencing homelessness. While they may share some characteristics like mental health problems, addictions issues, past traumas, and little to no income, rough sleepers are distinct in two ways. The first is that many rough sleepers have chosen to sleep outside. They feel detached from the shelter system and government assistance and choose to not accept aid, and this may be due to personal traumas or circumstances. The second is that many rough sleepers, especially those who've been living outdoors for a long time, have developed a sense of pride and community. They do not view themselves as homeless because encampments are their homes. Any policy approach to address encampments and assist rough sleepers needs to consider these differences. Policies should also build on successes had in other jurisdictions like the United Kingdom, which will be referenced later. Note that while we have outlined characteristics of rough sleepers, the province does lack specific data and information about this vulnerable group. The current data collection standards for homelessness are point-in-time counts and by-name lists, but these methods do not always accurately capture rough sleepers. Next slide, please.
So to avoid these encampments from becoming a recurring problem, we suggest Ontario set a goal to meet rough sleepers where they are while addressing their immediate needs and to help them find permanent housing. And if we could move to the next slide, you can see the goal on the screen. So while this presentation will focus heavily on policy responses, we must remember that this is a human issue and that the province has a moral obligation to reduce suffering. This is why it is important that Ontario bring support to rough sleepers at the local level rather than force a one-size-fits-all approach. We acknowledge that the province is not on the front lines of this problem, and some of the policy options will rely on the expertise already developed at the municipal level. Over the course of this presentation, we outline a number of goals to be achieved in the short, medium, and long term that will guide our approach going forward. Next slide, please.
So to help understand the problem and to enable the development of an appropriate policy response, Ontario needs to take a closer look at the bigger picture. As my colleagues have emphasized, Ontario is facing a public emergency, highlighted in red, with cities and the public demanding the province help manage and find permanent solutions to these encampments. But while responding to the camps is the immediate problem, the overarching challenge, identified in blue, is the ongoing lack of suitable and affordable housing in Ontario. Put simply, those who end up living in encampments often have nowhere else to go. This problem is only expected to get worse as Ontario's housing market continues to tighten and inflation remains high. In order to respond to this issue in the long run, Ontario will need to disrupt the road to homelessness and rough sleeping you see before you. Next slide, please.
So zooming out, we understand the big picture as a pipeline with 3 distinct stages, each requiring different but complementary policy supports. Now, on the left, individuals and households are considered at risk due to a variety of reasons, the largest of which is being in core housing need. That is defined as households that spend 50% or more of their income on housing. And ultimately, policy solutions here need to prevent people from becoming homeless or rough sleepers. And when individuals cannot afford their housing, government's focus should be to alleviate the hardship these individuals face and connect them to services and social assistance. Now, on the right-hand side, individuals leaving homelessness either through provided supports, friends and family, or other reasons. And here the focus is to prevent their return to at-risk status. We view the current crisis of rough sleepers as a result of a bottleneck in this journey. Shelters and existing supports are struggling to help individuals and families due to an increased flow of homeless individuals as a result of the pandemic. Next slide, please. So what are the Ontario and federal government doing to address this bottleneck? Well, both governments have several programs aimed at addressing homelessness and increasing the supply of affordable housing, and all of these programs you can see are listed at the top of the matrix. Now, the province alone is projected to spend $446 million on homelessness programs in the 2022-23 fiscal year, and the province has also committed an additional $566 million in homelessness spending at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic through the Social Service Relief Fund. However, as we know from the growth of these encampments, this has not been entirely effective. So drawing your attention to the top row, this is because none of the existing programs at either the federal or provincial level directly address rough sleeping. The majority of the support is provided through the shelter system, which, as we know, is not used by rough sleepers. So we find that there is both a direct need to bring services to the encampments and to prevent the flow of at-risk individuals into this precarious situation. Next slide, please.
Another question worth asking is Ontario's current path sustainable? There is a cost to doing nothing. It is very unlikely the problem of rough sleepers and encampments will go away once the COVID-19 crisis has passed. Fewer COVID-19 cases could see some individuals return to shelters, but the pandemic is not the only reason rough sleeping exists. Cost of living in a red-hot housing market will continue to put pressures on people's wallets, and some may become homeless as a result. Current resources are not equipped to meet this potential influx, nor do they satisfy the immediate and distinct needs of rough sleepers. By not responding, encampments may become a common fixture in urban centers. Not responding also ignores the human face of this problem and does not satisfy Ontario's moral obligations. Rough sleeping is costly for the province in the long term. It is estimated rough sleepers currently cost Ontario a minimum of $42 million per year. This is a conservative estimate and does not account for expenses like emergency services, landscaping, health, and legal services. The problem will only become more expensive should encampments become a permanent issue. Ending encampments through police enforcement can be violent and is not cheap. Last summer, the City of Toronto spent $800,000 on policing alone to 3 clear encampment sites. These removals also came with an $800,000 landscaping bill. In addition, Ontario's coordination on this file with municipalities, the federal government, and NGOs is weak. Staying on the current path does not fix this shortcoming. The province has a unique opportunity to take stronger action to address the issue of rough sleepers and encampment sites. Choosing to not respond means this rare policy window will go unused. Next slide, please. So it is recommended that any policy approach taken by the government address the following 3 priority areas. In the short term, in red, focus on harm reduction by immediately meeting the needs of rough sleepers and reduce the dangers and disruptions these encampments can have on those living in them and around them. In the medium term, which is marked in green, stem the flow of at-risk individuals into homelessness and help rough sleepers afford permanent housing. And in the long term, which is marked in blue, increase Ontario's supply of affordable housing. The matrix before you indicates which goals each suggested policy option fulfills, with preferred choices indicated by the shaded colored boxes. The rationale for the outlined preferred approach relates back to the notion that Ontario needs to disrupt the road to homelessness in order to prevent rough sleeping from becoming an endemic issue. Next slide, please.
Our presentation will now examine the various policy options at the province's disposal. Recall that the intent of our short-term actions is to address the hazards and disruptions posed by rough sleepers to themselves and others. Our options are designed to be implemented quickly, with timelines not expected to take more than 1 year. Once implemented, these options could be done on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. One short-term option we propose is to construct housing units for rough sleepers. This can be done through building tiny homes, which provides rough sleepers with a temporary place to call home as they transition from encampments to longer-term housing. There are 2 different types of tiny homes. The first The first type are small wooden insulated structures. This option is lower in cost and can be built to be moved, which allows municipalities to relocate the structures if necessary. The second type are modular homes. These are larger dorm-style buildings with multiple units within them. These homes require less land as units can be stacked on top of each other. Although tiny homes are faster to build compared to traditional affordable housing projects, the need to find and acquire land may cause delays. This could be a particular challenge in heavily populated cities, such as Toronto. Furthermore, provincial and municipal rezoning would need to be fast-tracked to ensure quick construction of the tiny homes. Next slide, please.
With that in mind, our preferred short-term approach is to coordinate with municipalities to create what we call mobile operating service teams, or MOST. The MOST initiative targets the specific needs of rough sleepers by bringing resources to them. Most units would be the first to respond to the creation of encampments as opposed to police. These teams are temporary and mobile units equipped with outreach services to help rough sleepers transition out of camps into safer, more permanent housing. Recall that one of the challenges of assisting rough sleepers is that many are skeptical and detached from government services. They do not identify as homeless and do not wish to be treated as such. Now, while some rough sleepers may choose to live outside permanently, many want a home. Drastic improvements in standard of living and the physical and mental well-being of rough sleepers will occur once they are housed and supported. Research from the UK has found that one of the most effective ways to connect rough sleepers to housing services is by using an autonomy-based approach. Social workers and advocates provide information by building personal relationships, giving rough sleepers the freedom to make their own choices. This model is the crux of the MOST initiative and makes it easier for rough sleepers to make the choice to seek safer and healthier accommodations. Next slide, please. Here's an example of what the MOST initiative could look like in Ottawa. With a wide variety of nonprofits and charitable organizations available throughout the city, outreach can be tailored. Outreach workers would assist rough sleepers in navigating social assistance programs, housing registries, and accessing necessary items like identification. Health responders would also be on site to deal with any emergencies like overdoses, and collaboration with public health units can be done to provide mobile COVID-19 vaccination sites. Foodstuffs can also be provided if needed. Providing sanitation and site maintenance is a key part of this initiative, as it both reduces harm to inhabitants and responds to the public's concern about trash and cleanliness. These actions also reduce cleanup costs once the encampment is no longer in use. Finally, most units would also provide an avenue for data collection that is specific to rough sleepers to address existing data gaps. Next slide, please.
Turning to the medium term, our focus is to stem the flow of at-risk individuals going into homelessness and to help rough sleepers afford housing. Timelines for these medium-term options are expected to fall between 1 to 3 years. Our intent is for these proposals to be in place sooner rather than later. Once implemented, these programs could continue on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. A medium-term option for preventing homelessness are rent banks. A rent bank is a homelessness prevention program that offers grants to low-income renters. Rent banks are intended for people who are either behind on their rent or need assistance in covering their first and last month's rent. To implement the solution, the province could provide funding to municipalities for creating new rent banks. This could be delivered through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. However, rent banks do not provide help to rough sleepers, as it's focused on preventing homelessness. The program is targeted towards individuals who need short-term rent support. Applicants must be paying market rent, and grants are limited to a maximum of $4,000 or 3 months worth of rent. As a result of these conditions, rent banks do not help rough sleepers afford housing. Next slide, please.
Now, taking a look at our preferred medium-term approach, a number of studies have found that one of the best ways to stem the increase of homelessness and rough sleepers is to provide income and rental assistance over a longer period of time. While the Canada-Ontario housing benefit includes approximately $200 a month for individuals in core housing need, the benefit is available to a number of different groups. This puts pressure on the province's service managers to distinguish the most deserving candidates among a larger pool of individuals, and as a result, rough sleepers can be left out given the many obstacles they face in accessing government services. So to address this, we propose to divert funds from the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit and to add new funds for the creation of a homeless housing benefit, which would be delivered using Ontario's 47 service managers, but explicitly target the homeless, rough sleeping, and at-risk population. We would also increase the funding amounts from $200 to a minimum of $300 a month and up to $800 a month, scaled to the jurisdiction to supplement the challenges these individuals face in finding income. Now, while this will require increased expenditures, it is both safer and cheaper than building new units and has been shown to be very effective in reducing rough sleeping in other jurisdictions, while also providing a large return on investment in the medium to long term. Next slide, please. Now, moving into the long term, we need to address the lack of affordable and suitable housing in the province. Accordingly, we have set two goals: to increase the provincial stock of affordable and suitable housing, and to attract federal funds wherever possible. We also want to note that there are a number of existing long-term funding programs that have been implemented through the National Housing Strategy that have yet to come into effect. So under the NHS, the federal and provincial governments have committed to $4 billion in spending through to 2028, in addition to existing provincial programs. We expect that the long-term strategies in place to build affordable housing for the homeless population will also reduce the number of rough sleepers in Ontario. While we propose some changes, it is important to remember that allowing existing programs to take effect is also an option. Next slide, please.
Sticking with the existing programs, though, prevents Ontario from capitalizing on an opportunity to seek out additional funds to build affordable housing with the support of the federal government. During the pandemic, the federal government funded the $2.5 billion Rapid Housing Initiative to provide expedited housing to the country's most vulnerable. Since its launch in October 2020, this national program has seen 10,000 plus new affordable housing units come on stream, including more than 2,800 units here in Ontario. Homelessness and housing advocates have praised the Rapid Housing Initiative and are urging the federal government to extend and expand the program in their upcoming budget. The Rapid Housing Initiative has helped Ontario and many of its major cities increase their affordable housing stock without bearing the full brunt of the capital costs. Given the strong outside interest in responding to public concerns about encampments and the lack of affordable housing, Ontario could add its voice to those seeking an extension, expansion, and a replenishment of federal funding for the Rapid Housing Initiative. Next slide, please.
Now, I want to turn to how much we expect our proposals to cost. This is always a common question. We expect that new spending for our proposals will be approximately $70.6 million annually for the next 6 years. However, it is important to know that this is likely less expensive than doing nothing, and the problem is already costing us millions. Preliminary costing for the MOST initiative includes providing funds for equipment, staff, and operating expenses within each unit, and we anticipate a total provincial expense of $45 million. However, this will work to directly mitigate many of the existing costs of these encampments. For the homeless housing benefit, we propose reallocating 25% of the existing Canada-Ontario housing benefit funds with an additional annual top-up of $25.6 million in new spending, and this may be cost-shared with the federal government given its strong alignment with the goals of the National Housing Strategy. And finally, our proposal to expand and extend the Rapid Housing Initiative relies on new funds from the federal government. This program stream is policy that the province can use to appeal to the federal government to justify the need for an additional $490 million that the province believes it is entitled to under the National Housing Strategy, but has yet to be allocated. What we want to convey here is that while there will be new provincial expenditures, the proposed solutions are cost-effective and designed to mitigate the risk that encampments become a recurring problem in Ontario. Next slide, please. So to close things out, we want to reiterate that these encampments are an urgent crisis in municipalities with long-term implications. The COVID-19 pandemic has made rough sleeping a highly visible problem, and in doing so, created a large window of opportunity to work with municipal and federal partners to explicitly address rough sleeping across many communities. We know from past experience that a one-size-fits-all approach has not been successful in reaching the rough sleeping population, which is why we have taken public concerns into account and developed a number of solutions that meet rough sleepers where they are and are explicitly tuned to meet their needs. Now is the time for the province to act, and we welcome further discussion on how exactly the province can do that. Thank you.
Well, members of the team, thank you very much for a concise and very interesting presentation. The members of the management team here do have some questions. I'm going to start with Pam McCurry. Pam.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much, everyone, for this very interesting presentation. It's very thorough. You've talked about the partnerships necessary to deliver on particularly the longer term vision that you have here. And you've talked about your sense that the stars are aligning, and that the federal government will naturally understand the need, and they've got a national housing strategy and a rapid housing funding flowed. But one thing I haven't heard from you is whether or not there are, I mean, those are kind of the soft influences, but does the federal government have any particular jurisdiction or legal obligations that would motivate it to participate more vigorously in the kind of approach that you're recommending?
So I can take that question. There has been a debate. The federal government used to be responsible for housing, and they passed that responsibility on to the provinces, and that in Ontario was passed on to the municipalities. But there has definitely been a pressure put on the federal government in the last few years that has spoken that the federal government really needs to take some action in this space, and they do have a responsibility to ensure that the residents of Canada and the citizens of Canada have the needs that they need. And I think during the pandemic, we've kind of seen the federal government step on that with the Rapid Housing Initiative, and that's why they brought it to the table. They understood that they did have a role to play. They have the coffers to supply some of the capital costs that the provinces and municipalities may not have. And through their National Housing Initiative, they have put themselves in this spot because they have set a target to eliminate chronic homelessness and, reduce the homelessness across the board, across the country. And so understanding that this is kind of an area that the federal government has highlighted, we feel like there is an opportunity for Ontario to bring our arguments to the table with clearly designed programs that fit with their initiative and their ideas already to meet that need.
Okay, thank you. Pam, further follow-up on that or on anything else within your area of interest and responsibility? Oops. No, okay. Pam, you're muted right now.
Okay, sorry. No, I'm just saying I'll pass it to others.
Okay, Alan, Alan Northcott, my colleague Alan Northcott.
Thank you for this presentation. We know we're dealing with a complex issue, and I appreciated the range of solutions over different timescales that you provided to us, which leads me to the question about, could you give us a better sense of the extent to which for those different solutions, that different array of solutions, they are informed by evidence or informed by research? And then a related question to that is, in looking at that research, what questions did it raise that you think would need to be answered if we were to have success in your proposal?
Who wants to take that one?
Sure, I'll start with the short term. Yeah. So the MOST initiative is designed based on research out of the UK. And the UK had a lot of success in dealing with rough sleepers, especially those who've been rough sleeping for very long periods of time, so 4 to 45 years even. And they had a lot of success with their personal autonomy-based approach in moving rough sleepers into accommodation. So that's why we're basing the personal autonomy approach there in the short term. However, we do recognize that our situation isn't the same as the UK. And part of the beauty of the MOST initiative is that it's also, while it's an information providing initiative to rough sleepers, it's also an information gathering initiative for the province. So we can understand that we might have some, I don't want to say chronic, but long-term rough sleepers in those encampments, but we might have a few who simply are sleeping rough because they are not comfortable in shelters. So it's a way for us to kind of gauge, okay, what is the range of rough sleeping, and how can we tailor our policies there? So that's the research we're basing the MOST initiative on. And it's also recognizing by leaning into municipalities and existing organizations within these municipalities, we're recognizing the expertise on that level that the province might not have. So maybe I'll turn to my other colleagues to discuss the medium and long term. Any further comments on the research issue, colleagues?
Yeah, I could jump in here.
Okay, Nick, you go ahead. Yeah.
So one thing that we know is that we actually don't know a lot about the impact of these encampments on the province. So one of the remaining questions that we really do need to address, really across the short, medium, and long term, is how much exactly it's costing the province. So the preliminary research that we use out of the UK did provide some estimates of the cost of individual rough sleepers, but that is only helpful for one rough sleeper. So we need to know exactly how many people we have in these encampments. We have some estimates, but it's changed over the course of the pandemic. And we also need to know the full range of costs associated, which includes enforcement, health services, social services, environmental impact and landscaping, legal services, so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you, Tiger team. I'm going to turn now to my colleague, Trina Fraser. Trina, the microphone is over to you.
Thank you for your presentation. And I picked up that you spoke a lot about the fact that this is a human issue and to meet them where they're at. And you identified that one size does not fit all. If you could, in one sentence, put the key point out to the Premier and the public, how would you sum it up to understand about the issue of rough sleeping?
Who wants to take a run at that one? Boil it down to one sentence.
I can take that.
Okay.
We actually have a communications plan in the appendices. So if you could flip to that slide, I think it's slide 24, maybe 23 or 22. There you go. Go back. Sorry. So we've kind of summarized it in one sentence. One more, 22, slide 22. There we go. We've kind of already summarized the issue that we're facing for the various jurisdictions. And if I were to summarize this to the Premier, the reality is this problem is not going away. And these individuals are residents of Ontario, and they do have specific needs. And continuing with our approach is not going to solve the problem, and it's not going to go away, and it's not going to make these individuals want to become non-rough sleepers. And so we've kind of targeted various groups in terms of passing on that message. And we want to explicitly say as well to the municipalities, look, we are your partner and we want to help you.
Okay, that very good answer. Thank you, Kelsey. Trina, and over more follow-up if you'd like. Go ahead. You've got the time.
I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, let me turn to other members of our panel here. Any other questions you want to? Susie McDonald, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much for an excellent presentation. Just wondering, you spoke about Ottawa in particular, Toronto, both have relatively large Indigenous populations. You talked about intersectionality and the need to address people where they're at. I'm just wondering about coordination between provincial government and NGOs and how you might be able to really address those intersectional issues.
Sure, I'll answer that question. So that's again, the nice part about the MOST initiative is its flexibility. So if we actually return to slide 14, oh, one more, sorry. Perfect. Yeah, so I provided a couple examples of different organizations that we could lean into in the Ottawa area. But essentially what we would imagine the MOST initiative would look like is that as the province, we've set out criteria for what we think would work well. So we're saying we want to see outreach workers, health services, food supplies, and waste and sanitation management provided to encampments. And we give the municipalities the flexibility to partner with whom they see fit based on the rough sleeping population in that municipality. So I provided some examples here, but it could look very different based on who we see in encampments as the year progresses. And my colleague Dong will follow up.
Thank you, Sydney. One way the provincial government could facilitate collaborations with both the federal governments or with the municipalities and nonprofits is through creating a formal agreement, such as a memorandum of understanding that clearly outlines the responsibilities of each partner in the agreement. This could help clear up any misunderstandings and can help clearly establish what each partner is responsible for and their role in the grand scheme of an operation.
Any further follow-up from anybody on the team on that issue of coordination and FedProv and FedProv municipal? Let me just see. Any further questions from the panel? Well, in that case, then let me say to this Tiger team. Oh, Janet, go ahead. Janet, you got a quick question and a quick answer. Go ahead.
Sorry, just really quickly, you talked about the collaboration and the experience in the UK. Can you tell me what the biggest obstacle was in the UK to implementing their MOST approach?
Got 8 seconds, guys. Nick.
I can jump in on here just very, very quickly. The MOST approach is actually an original idea that we think would be very, very flexible and tailored to the needs of Ontario. Most of our understanding of the rough sleepers, though, is based off of research in the UK. But the policy is our own idea.
Okay, thank you very much, Tiger team. We appreciate the presentation and we appreciate your answers. Thank you very much.